Hello and welcome back to my series of videos where I review the freeCodeCamp Pomodoro clock. In
That's
this
it for this
video, we'll
video.
be
I hope you
implementing the
enjoyed it. Please click that
start-stop
subscribe
button.
button.
The
Please
goal
click
of
this
the like
video
button,
is for
please
you
click
to
the
understand the
notification
set
bell,
interval
share this with your
function and
friends.
how that's
I
used
appreciate
in
it.
creating,
Peace.
say, a timer, and also how to use the use effect react hook. As always, if you like my videos, please support me. Follow me on Twitter, on dev.to, on Instagram. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, like, and share. We'll start off this video by starting our development server. Inside the project folder, go ahead and type in npm start, or in my case, yarn start. The browser should launch the application in a browser window, and you'll see the application that we left off in the last video. We can change session, we can change break. However, one thing I do notice is that when we change session, the timer left does not change. So we want to have the time left change with the session. Let's go into some code and figure out how to do that. Basically, here in time left, we want to change time left whenever session length changes. To do that, we'll use a use effect react hook. This is a function that takes in a callback that is called whenever a variable that we're listening on changes. This second parameter here, this array, is called our dependency list. In this list, we put the variables that we're listening for changes on. For instance, if we listen for changes on session length, you'll see we can always call console log session length has changed, and we'll show the new session length. This console log will always be run whenever session length changes. To illustrate that, let's go back to our application, open up our JavaScript console, and change session. You'll see here session length has changed and the new session length. So instead of console logging out session length has changed, what if we did set time left to the session length? Let's go back to our code. When we make session length, let's say 30, our time left changes. This is exactly what we want to do, and this is how we use effect. We subscribe to variable changes. Here, we define those in the dependency list, and we define the function that we want to run whenever the variable in the dependency list changes. Now, let's get started with our start-stop button. Down here in the return, I want you to add a button that reads start for now. This button will have an onClick function. Let's call the onClick function handle start stop click, and let's define handle start stop click up here. Handle start stop click will be a function. Now what we want to do is decrement time left by 1 every second. And keep in mind that 1 second equals 1,000 milliseconds. To do this, we'll use our set interval function. Now, a set interval takes a function as its first parameter and takes in a number of milliseconds as its second parameter. Now, this defines how often the function inside the first parameter of the set interval function is called. So every 1,000 milliseconds, let's say I want to call hello there, exclamation point. So let's go back here, click our start, and you'll see on the bottom, hello there is getting called once every 1,000 milliseconds. Great. Now instead of console log, let's set time left. And what we want to set time left to is the previous time left. So the setters here in use state also have a secondary signature. We can either put in what we want to set time left to, so I can say 50, or it takes in a function that allows us to use the previous time left. So that's the time left that the time left component previously had in its state. So this previous time left, we want to return that previous time left minus 1. So that'll set the time left, that'll decrement it by 1. Now let's go back and start our timer. You'll see that our timer is decrementing once every single second. Just one little guard that I want to put in here. Inside of this function, I only want it to be called if, let's say, our new time left is the previous time left minus 1. If that new time left is greater than 0. I want to return this, or this return value is what we're setting time left to prev time left minus 1. Else, let's return the previous time left unchanged. So let's go back, see if this works. Start, and this works greatly. We can go all the way down here to 1 minute. Let's prove that it works. So let's set, for development purposes, I want to set this to 100 milliseconds just to make it a little faster. So we'll decrement this session all the way down to 1 and see what this looks like. Now, one thing I noticed is that we have the number of seconds shown, which is not great, but this does work. It does stop at 1, sadly. So let's say if new time left is greater than or equal to 0, and let's try that one. Great, you'll see that time left stops at 0. Now what I want to fix is the 59 or the 58 or the 57 displaying on the screen instead of, say, the 00 to signify the minutes and 59 to signify the seconds. This should be 00 colon 10 or 9 or 8. Now the moment.duration, the format part of this function, does take a secondary settings object, and we can write trim is false here, and that should fix up that setting where we see 59 instead of 00 colon 59. Great. Now the next thing we want to do is make this start button a stop button once it's started. Now what this stop button should do is basically here in handle start stop click, if we are in stopped mode, I want to decrement time left by 1 every second, and to this we'll use set interval. However, if we are in started mode, we want to stop the timer. Now to do this, we'll use clear interval. Now this is basically the opposite of set interval. It clears any set interval. Now that means we need to save the ID of this set interval. Set interval returns its ID. So basically we can get our new interval ID and extract that out into a variable. However, we do need to hold on to it in our state. So up here in state, I'll have a interval ID and the corresponding setter. And I'll have that use state equals null. So we'll keep this null whenever it's basically stopped. That's how we'll know that we're stopped. So that means that we know we are started if the interval ID is not equal to null. If it's not equal to null, it's some ID, it's started, the clock is running. So up here we'll have our if it is started, and we'll bring up our comments from there. And here we'll have our else clause, and we'll have this here. Now in the else, we want to set our interval ID to the new interval ID. Now again, if we are started, we want to clear the interval. And which interval do we want to clear? We want to clear the one that's stored here in interval ID. And lastly, down here at our button, we want to change the text that's displayed if we're started. So if we are started, we want to display stop, and if we're stopped, we want to display start. Let's save that, and let's go back to our application and see how we did. Let's bring the session all the way down to 1 to be able to more easily test out. Let's press start, it started. Let's press stop, and it stopped. However, what I do see is this here, this stop button, did not change back to start. What that means for me is that we forgot to set this interval ID to null here. That'll signify that this again is stopped. So let's try again. Let's click start. We started. Let's click stop. We stopped, and our button now says start. We can click it again, and it'll start there. I do want to recap this handle start stop click really quickly because there is a lot of things happening. We have two branches. We have the if it's started branch and the if it's not started branch. Basically, if we're in stopped mode. We start off in stop mode, so we set an interval to decrement the time left by 1 every 1,000 milliseconds. Remember, here we're using 100 just for development purposes. We take this interval ID and we set it so we can hold onto it for the future. Now that's if we haven't started yet, if we're in stopped mode. Here, if we have started yet, which we define as by the interval ID not being null, if we have something there, we should clear the interval. We should basically stop that function from running and then set our interval ID to null. Now the last thing I want to implement is the switch from session to break, from let's say the 25 minutes to the 5 minutes when the Pomodoro clock runs out and we finally have a break. Now that'll happen when our time left is less than 0. So basically right here we want to, if it's a session, switch to break and set the time left to the break session length. And very similarly, if it's a break, we want to switch to session and set the time left to the session length. So as you notice, we need to keep track if it's a break or a session. So right here, I'll make a new state variable called current session type and the corresponding setter, and I'll initialize this to the string session. Now this can either be session or it will be able to be break. It'll be no other string. So here we are, if current session type is equal to session. Let's set the current session type to break and then set the time left to the break session length. However, you'll notice here that we did not pass in a break length at all to time left. So let's go back into our app, take this break length and pass it to time left, just like this. And back in time left, let's declare the variable break length and set the time left to the break length. Now we'll do this very similarly for if it's a break, current session type equals break, and we'll do something like this. So this code here should take care of the switch from session to break and from break to session. Let's check it out in our application. Bring this all the way down to 1 and see if this works. Oh, this is not good. I should not be able to have a session equal to 0. I'll fix that in 1 second. So we'll start, and you'll see here we switched over to our break. However, there is no string to tell us if we're in a break or a session. So let's have a string here in our return to tell us whether it's a break or a session. The ID of this string will be timer label. And in here, we'll render out the current session type. Let's go back to our application, and you'll see that session is rendered there. I actually want to let's put it above the formatted time left. And the formatted time left should also be in a paragraph with ID, I believe, of time left. Let's start our application. Let's bring this all the way down to 1 to make it a little easier to test. And you'll see just like that, we do switch over into a break. This is excellent. This is exactly what we want. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please click that subscribe button. Please click the like button. Please click the notification bell. Share this with your friends. I appreciate it. Peace.